In the back of a Parisian taxi, posters slammed TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership currently being negotiated between Brussels and Washington. The taxi driver explained why TTIP was going to crush the poor, weaken democracy and give even more power to global corporations. When we got out of the taxi, Fernando gave us leaflets about the campaign to stop TTIP. Whether you agree with Fernando or not, this is democracy in action. The people do have a voice, even if they are not well represented at the negotiating table. But what is interesting is that direct action is not spreading across Europe in the way that it's caught the imagination in France. For many Europeans, TTIP is just another trade deal, but it isn't.
We're talking about what could be the biggest bilateral trade deal in history.
The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, also known as TTIP.
A once-in-a-generation prize, and we are determined to seize it.
The European economy is bigger than the American one. So this is a negotiation between equals. Equals that have an equal interest in an ambitious outcome of the negotiation.
A lot of citizens have concerns. They fear that standards for environment protection or consumer protection might be at stake.
Our publics, both in Europe and the United States, have legitimate questions when it comes to trade deals as to whether or not it's going to benefit their countries over the long term, and can we make sure that hard-won victories around consumer protection or environmental protection are preserved as opposed to weakened.
We have to look very carefully at principles that we adhere to, that we believe in and that are fundamental to us in Europe, and to see how we can combine that with the opportunities that are inevitably there. At the end of the day, we should be able to come to a win-win agreement, but of course my interest is to make the European side win most.
Competition is a good thing, but not if you lose.
The losers are those who care about GMOs, who don't want GM food here. The losers are those who care about the quality of our food, chlorine-washed chicken, hormone-fed beef. The losers are all those who would benefit from regulation, because what's going to happen is they're going to have regulatory convergence. Does anyone believe they're going to converge things upwards, that we're going to have higher labour standards, higher environmental standards? Clearly we're not.
I cannot see what the problem is there. Of course, there are a number of differences between the EU and the US, and they will pertain, they will continue. But on the other hand, they are about the closest to us that you can imagine, no? So take, for example, labour standards. I can see that this is a big worry when you discuss with developing countries or when you discuss with emerging economies, but both the EU and the US are mature economies. So I can't see that this would be the dividing issue.
I think the Commission's Trade Department sees itself as a service provider for the European industry to open markets abroad. That's actually what the Trade Commissioner told me as his job description. They don't even think about that this will have an effect on labor rights or the environment or our climate. So it is in their understanding to act for a European industry.
Do you want to take, here are my rules in Europe for protecting people for cars. And here are the US rules. What you want to do is you want to see if you can build a bridge between those two sets of rules. Right now, in order to meet the standards of safety required in Europe and in the United States, you have to crash hundreds of cars. And these cars are prototypes, so they're very expensive, much more expensive than when they're coming off the factory line. And you have to crash them. If you're a smaller manufacturer, the idea of doing 100 car crashes for European rules and then 100 car crashes for American rules makes it prohibitive. You just don't even think of offering that car. There are things like that that come in literally every area of our economies. Agriculture is an area where we often have a lot of different problems, often related to food safety concerns. Not that the food is less safe, but that our food safety regulators actually look at things differently.
We in Europe feel very strongly about the precautionary principle. So first knowing whether a product is safe to enter the market before allowing it onto the market, where the Americans think that this is too conservative. and they prefer to just allow goods in the market until a problem is occurring.
One of the sore points for people, particularly on the left, is that consumer standards will be lowered by TTIP. They cite chlorinated chicken, dipping the chicken in chlorine to kill bacteria.
It's quite a big stake for American industry who want us to import this kind of chicken. And I've heard that the Commissaire of Trade would like Europe to also welcome chicken that are treated with chlorine. There's no point using this kind of disinfectant. It's like antibiotics. If you use too many antibiotics, then they are not useful, they are not efficient when you need them.
There is a lot of, I wouldn't even call it gossip, because it's said very openly that is not correct. For example, you still have a number of politicians saying that we are going to import hormone beef. That's simply not true. And the best proof is that we have made an agreement with Canada, and Canada gets a quota for beef. Well, it will have to be hormone-free beef. No? We are not going to change our SPS standards. We are not going to do that. But it seems to me that this is part of the political capital of a number of politicians, and that's why they continue, in fact, telling lies about this.
Speaking with Commissioner de Gucht, it's impossible to doubt his sincere belief that TTIP is about a long-term plan for Europe's economy. It's not about adding another percentage point or two to GDP this year or next year.
The energy discussion is a very interesting one. Of course, now United States seeking to become energy independent. And the impact that that will have on our industries and on our cooperation. The last word hasn't been said about it. What's important for us is that we also have environmental standards in Europe that are very important. And one could say the precautionary principle also applies to shale gas, for example.
People think that we have no access to shale gas. That's not true. A lot of European companies, major companies, have licenses to export shale gas. Now, the big difference if we make this agreement with the US would be that this is legally certain for the future, because it would be in the treaty as such, this access to shale gas.
Once we have a trade agreement in place, export licenses for liquefied natural gas destined to Europe would be much easier. Something that's obviously relevant in today's geopolitical climate.
Energy independence for Europe is a key topic in and of itself, and so if that can be sparked by TTIP or by global affairs like the crisis around Crimea and tensions with Russia, it is actually only a reminder of how important our cooperation is politically, economically, and how we need to redefine the transatlantic relation for the next generation.
The Commission always is promising us, when we are asking about it, that the standards will be not lowered. We are keeping our standards. The question is how.
How will regulations and laws be harmonized in the future between the US and the EU, so post the agreement? And we see from the proposals that have been leaked from the Commission that these will provide many avenues for business to intervene very early in the democratic policy process to weaken, postpone or even kill legislation.
There's no one who thinks that you can use an agreement like this to, quote, lower regulation. It's just not going to work. That's why we have parliaments in a democracy system. They're not going to. Trade negotiators would love to think that they're all powerful, but they know they're not.
It's up to us parliamentarians to talk to the citizens and to make things clear. Also countering this overemphasis of the benefits, but also countering these very primitive anti-positions of some NGOs and some parties. I think serious discussions of the benefits, of the problems, that is necessary, and that's up to Euro parliamentarians to be objectively part of that debate.
Sometimes I have the feeling that a number of NGOs would like to be on my right hand and left hand side when I'm negotiating. No, that's not realistic either. I'm not hiding anything, but on the other hand, you need some degree of confidentiality when you negotiate. You cannot negotiate in the open. No? You can discuss in the open in Parliament and vote in the Parliament, yes, but negotiate in the open, that has never happened before. And I think it would not succeed, by the way.
When we speak with lobby groups on the left, it's clear they're motivated, organized, and very often opposed to any kind of trade deal, which leaves the quieter majority in the middle. Is their silence a sign of acquiescence, that they trust the Quisthoudt-Rowohl and those leading Europe's trade policy, or is it a sign that TTIP is too complex and too far removed from their everyday reality? TTIP cannot be all things to all people, but it can be the strong foundation for a future European economy. It will only survive as a useful trade platform if it demonstrates fairness, respect for democracy and accountability. In the end, TTIP may be an offer we can refuse, but ultimately we have to take care of business.